Warramai, everyone. Warramai is welcome in Darug, the language used in the Eora Nation, the land on which our Mable office is located here in Sydney. My name is Linda and I'm an engagement manager with Mable. I'm honoured to be asked to lead the gathering of everyone here today through our acknowledgement of country, giving respectful reflection to the oldest living culture in the world, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. This time of acknowledgement is an important moment to reflect on cultural and individual diversity and embrace and encourage inclusivity, respect and a sense of belonging for all people. A sentiment that's reflected daily by Mable through the vision, mission and work that we all do. We acknowledge all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the traditional custodians of the lands, waterways and skies across Australia. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging and extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today and any that may be joining us online. We recognise the contribution of all First Nations people to the land we live, work and play on. Didgeridoo, thank you.
Thank you, Linda, for the acknowledgement of country, and I'd like to welcome everyone here today, all of those joining us in the Mable office and all of those joining us virtually. I'd also like to acknowledge and recognise our guest of today, Dinesh, along with his mother, Chithrani, and Naz, who's hosting the Q&A session. For those of you who are joining us online, if you'd like to ask a question during the Q&A session, please do that via the chat function in the YouTube page. So I'd like to take a moment just to talk about how we ended up here today and how Dinesh is in the Mable office sharing some of his story with us. And I guess I can acknowledge that Dinesh has been a long-term supporter of Mable, and his commitment to living a rich and full life is in total alignment with what Mable is striving to achieve through giving people choice over the supports they need in their life. And both Dinesh and his mum, Chithrani, have developed a close relationship with our Queensland Mable team. Brad Grieve is here today, and Linda, who did the welcome to country, acknowledgement of country. Earlier this year, Dinesh generously gave his time at a Mable event, which was celebrating Queensland Small Business Month, and he was recognising people with disability that were running their own small business, and he opened up the discussion about what is possible for people when they're able to engage the right supports. In May of this year, Dinesh was in Sydney. He was at the Australian Fashion Week as one of the models for fashion designer Carol Taylor and her adaptive fashion line, who was actually a recipient of Mable Community Grants. But Dinesh and Chithrani were able to drop by the Mable office, and we were in the reception area, and on the table was Dylan Alcott's book, Able. And that led us to a discussion about Dinesh's forthcoming book, and a discussion about, well, we'd love to host a book reading here at Mable, and here we are. And what really struck me about the book is it's one that we really felt we needed to share was, you know, Dinesh's positive outlook and obvious passion for encouraging people to pursue their dreams, and that's why we wanted to be in a position where we could help him share that story with others that are part of the broader Mable community. So I'm really pleased that Mable plays a very small part in helping share this story and hopefully sharing it with a wider and wider audience. So a little bit of background on Dinesh for those that don't know. He's a doctor, a lawyer, disability advocate, researcher, runway model. I think it really qualifies him as a massive overachiever, and I think he's going to share some of that story with us today. But Dinesh became the first medical graduate with quadriplegia in Queensland, and then the first graduate doctor with quadriplegia to begin work in the state. He was the second graduating doctor with quadriplegia to start working clinically in Australia. He works at the Gold Coast University Hospital and at Griffith University. He was in 2021 the Queensland Australian of the Year. He was awarded the Order of Australia Medal in 2019. and he's the third Australian to receive the Henry Viscardi Achievement Award in New York in 2019. His autobiography, Stronger, tells the story of how a puddle of water on a highway changed his life forever. Halfway through medical school, Dinesh was involved in a catastrophic car accident that caused a cervical spinal injury. After his accident, his strength and determination saw him return to medical school and finish now with quadriplegia. It's a moving and thought-provoking tale that gives a really good insight into the charismatic, intelligent and witty man that Dinesh is. And what struck me was, despite the adversity he's faced and the hurdles that people have put in front of him, Dinesh has a positive outlook on life and is incredibly generous with his time, making it his mission to advocate for the disability community. His strong desire to help others is unmissable, and I think explains his decision to be a doctor. And after everything he's been through, Dinesh believes he is happier, stronger and more capable than before the accident, and it's helped clarify what's important in his life and taught him that happiness and strength can always be found within. So with that brief introduction, I'd love to hand over to Dinesh and allow him to share part of his story with us all today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for Linda and Brad and Julia and Peter and the Mable team for having me today. I'm just constantly taking stock of life and thinking about getting to this point, because I just never imagined that my life would be this way, particularly 12 and a bit years ago when I woke up in the intensive care unit, not being able to move my arms or breathe on my own. So to be here sharing this time with all of you and looking back at life and the time that has been, it's actually pretty surreal. So thank you. And it's a pretty special day actually, because I got to meet people today for the first time, like Naz, who I've been talking to for a couple of years even, but never met face to face. So it's a special day to be doing that as well. To start off with, I was asked to share a passage from the book, which I might do. And it's something I often think about with my beautiful assistant, Carlos, who will help me hold the book. But this is something I often think about when I live life today, because I think that life is so fleeting and life is so temporary. And we never know what happens tomorrow. We never know what comes. And that's what happened to me when I had the car accident. My life changed within seconds. I never expected myself to have a spinal cord injury. I never expected myself to have this journey. And I could have died that day. But every day when I go to work in the emergency department as well, often I hear alarms going off, and often I hear doctors being called into the room, and often I hear a resuscitation or trauma. And every time that happens, I stop for a second. Well, I don't. I need to go. But at least in my mind, I think, I wonder what that person was thinking that day when they woke up. I wonder if they hugged the people that they love. I wonder if they were happy with their life. I wonder if they had any regrets. Because some of these people don't make it out of that situation, and that's the end of their life. So it's something I think about often, and this passage from the book, I think kind of reflects what I learned from that experience. So I'm going to read that out to you. And it leads on from when I talked about being in the intensive care unit and what kept me going. Up until that point in my life, I did everything I could. I had really lived. I took that spur-of-the-moment trip to Japan. I asked that pretty blonde girl out in high school. I drove the fast car. I did a lot. No experience was unventured. There were enough memories to know that I had lived life to the fullest so far. Carpe diem, baby. I can't remember where, but I came across an interesting idea once. Say that you're 30 years old now. the average global life expectancy, according to the United Nations in 2019, was 72.6 years. That means, in 2019's terms, you could potentially expect to live another 42.6 years if things went well. That sounds like a lot, but what if it became 42 summers? How many of those summers could you guarantee living life to the fullest? Better yet, what if you told the teenage you that there were only a couple of summers left until school finished and life changed course forever? How many summers do you have with your college friends? How many summers might you have before the baby comes? How many summers do you have with your children before they leave home? Put into that context, the number starts to look precious. There's no time to waste. I've learned that in life, tomorrow doesn't matter. Today matters. Now matters. There's no guarantee about what tomorrow will bring. There's not even a guarantee that it'll come at all. That's why it's important to seize the day. Today. Now. Up to that point in the ICU, I was glad that I had seized every day, every moment, and every opportunity. Carpe diem. And you know, I think outside of seizing life and outside of making the most of every moment that I have, I'm also grateful because we were just wandering through the streets of Sydney, and this is the first city that we moved to when we were in Australia. So we landed at the Sydney airport on my 10th birthday in 1994. And I grew up in a country, actually my cousin's here, we both turned 38 this month, but we grew up in a country that was at war for 3 decades. There was so much violence and there was so much poverty, there was so much suffering. And even now there are people without electricity, without food, without medical care. So for us to be living here, to be sitting in this room full of light, where it's warm enough, where we've probably all eaten, I'm grateful for that every single day. So I think gratitude plays a big part in the reason why I'm happy today as well. And I'm grateful for Naz, for the friendship and coming to hang out with me here today.
I might quickly take the opportunity to introduce Naz before she hosts the Q&A. But for more than a decade, Naz Campanella has worked at the ABC, starting her journalism career as a cadet in 2011 before working her way through the ranks as the National Disability Affairs reporter. Naz is a fierce advocate for Australians living with disabilities and has spoken candidly about her own lived experience and the times when people treated her differently because of her disability. As a new mum, Naz has her hands full navigating the ups and downs of motherhood. So we thank her especially taking time away from Lockie to facilitate the Q&A session with Dinesh today. Thank you, Naz.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you to Dinesh for being the one to suggest that I be here today to facilitate this. I would also like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we are coming to you from today, the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to any First Nations people who are in the room here with us today or online, but also a warm welcome to anyone with lived experience of disability, either in this room or online. Thank you for being a part of this very special book reading today. Special because it is an opportunity where I get to finally meet someone that I have become very firm friends with over the last few years. And obviously not just because of the pandemic. We've, living in different cities and having very busy schedules, both of us haven't had a chance to actually sit down and have a proper conversation. So it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today, Dinesh. Also an absolute pleasure to help launch this book. It is, how can I best sum it up? It is courageous, it's open, it's honest, and it's incredibly generous in its advice, in its storytelling, and in the way that Dinesh has been very open with everyone about all the aspects of his life, the good, the bad, and everything in between. I think sometimes us as people with disability need to feel like we have to gloss over things that make us still feel sometimes uneasy or lonely, because we are supposed to be happy and outgoing and brilliant all the time. And, you know, we are, but things can also be challenging for us. And I think what is so beautiful about this book is that it explores absolutely everything. So if you haven't had an opportunity to read it, you will be able to buy signed copies today. And for those of you online, we will be sending out a link later on. So please go read it, enjoy. But without further ado, I think we should start probably from some of your early memories from Sri Lanka. I went there a few years ago. It was beautiful. It's in a lot of turmoil now, but what do you remember from your very early childhood?
Can I just say before we start, I realised that this is actually the first time we sat down and had a face-to-face conversation.
Yeah, it is.
So we've known each other for a couple of years. We've talked online, we've kept in touch.
I've interviewed you for stories, begged you to be in TV stories.
Yeah. Well, what a way to meet, right? This is actually like it's great. And I'm already sitting down, so we didn't sit down.
Yeah, there is that. Sri Lanka, take us back there, childhood.
So Sri Lanka was, I have pretty good memories of Sri Lanka because my mom, she always protected me and she gave me a good life. I've had everything. I always had everything. And my mom fought for me to have everything. So she's always made sure that I was happy, safe. And even though I was a terribly, terribly naughty child, she made sure that I was safe. So I don't really have any, I don't think I have any memories that cause distress. But I have a lot of memories that that just make me think about what life was like for people in Sri Lanka. Like I said, the country was going through a war when I was growing up, and it lasted for 30 years. There was an ethnic war, and there was a political war in amongst that. So one of the things I remember when I was a kid was I was driving down this road with my mum, and we came up to this stretch of road where in the distance I could see columns of smoke snaking up into the sky. It was just black, thin columns of smoke. And we came closer to it again, and I saw piles of tires on the sides of the road. They were on fire. And then when we came closer to them again, I saw that there were people being burnt alive inside them. I didn't really know this memory to be, sometimes you just have those memories where you think it's a figment of your imagination, or you think it's something you've seen on TV. So a few years ago, I asked my mum whether we actually saw that, and she said yes. And then she asked me whether I remember what I saw next, which I didn't at the time, but she reminded me, and that was that there were people who were beheaded lining the road after that. So it was a really violent place, and so many people lost their lives, and so many people were poor, and there was so much corruption. And it was a country where the wealthy there's just a huge wealth gap and a huge power gap, and people really struggle. There are people that live without roofs, there were people that live without running water, electricity, and people with disability, Here I have the NDIS, we have Mable, we have wheelchairs, we have access to things. And sure, we're always trying to make it better, right? We're always trying to make the NDIS better, or we're trying to improve things, and we're trying to improve education and employment. But I was born in a country where Mum and I, we've been helping people with disability there. And I can tell you about a kid who lives in a house without a roof or running water or electricity. He doesn't have a wheelchair. He can't get to a school, and he has a spinal cord injury, and he has a single mum. And they live on something like $100 a month. So it's a vast contrast to today. But it's one of the reasons why I'm so so grateful to be living here, because I always remember that. And actually, something that for some reason I've been thinking about a lot recently, when I go to do the grocery shopping, like I did last week, I'm at Woolworths or Coles, and I'm looking at these vast aisles, and you can buy 50 different types of cheese and 20 different types of bread and like whatever you want. And actually, most people in this country can buy the things that they need or want. But in Sri Lanka, there was one type of cheese you could buy sometimes. So I'm even grateful to be able to see all that variety, the things that we have access to. So I think it's just contrasts that I remember most.
And you write very candidly about an experience in the book of going through depression around the time of your law degree. And I wonder if you can look back now and what you learnt about yourself and how resilient you were then. What do you remember from that time?
Depression is, I think we had Are You OK Day, and yeah, depression is quite a thing, right? Just this week, in the last couple of days, I spoke to 2 colleagues. They're specialists in different areas of medicine. Both of them attempted suicide. And it's a pretty scary thing when a doctor attempts suicide, because they know exactly what needs to be done. And so did my colleagues. Fortunately, their attempt was unsuccessful, and they're still with us, and they're getting the help that they need. But it just made me think, depression and mental health is such a significant issue, and it's so real. And I didn't really understand it at all, and I started going through it in the early 2000s, when I don't think we were having these conversations that we are today, where we couldn't be open, where we didn't have the support systems that we did, and it was a bit more taboo, and it was a bit less understood. So on top of the physiological and medical aspects of depression, I think for me, depression was a thing where I just needed to find purpose in my life. When we experience these challenges, I think it's also a signpost to maybe we need to do something differently. Maybe we need to change direction. Like, is it changing our career? Is it getting out of that toxic relationship? Is it trying to think about life a bit differently? So for me, it was like that too. I was at a point in my life where I hadn't really found purpose. And purpose is really important to all of us, right? I think. So I hadn't found purpose, and I said this to a room full of lawyers yesterday, and because I was purposeless, I decided to become a lawyer. So
I'm sure that went down well.
Yeah, they actually took it in very good humour.
Yeah, okay.
So I decided to become a lawyer, and I didn't really appreciate the law like I do today. Like, I really love it, and I think it allows us to fight for people. But I got into that, and I got into this really superficial life, and over a period of time I began to be very, very depressed. I felt flat initially, then I stopped enjoying the things that I used to enjoy, and then I started to feel anxious all the time, and then I started to have panic attacks. And if I was in a room full of people like this, I just couldn't do it. I'd run away. And I remember, actually just looking at the orange around the place, and it is so rich and bright and beautiful, but I couldn't appreciate the colors then. Like, it just all looked grey and flat. And I couldn't appreciate food. Like, I ate a pile of chocolate last night. We didn't get dinner, but we managed to find chocolate in the hotel room. So, it tasted so good, but I couldn't taste the food then. and the music didn't sound as good, and I couldn't feel the sun on my skin, so I just felt like a ghost in a grey world. So depression was like that, and I struggled at university, I struggled with relationships, I struggled with my job, I struggled with everything, and I just became a guy who was too afraid to go outside the house. So when I compare that to having a spinal cord injury, I woke up in the intensive care unit and I was paralyzed from the chest down. I couldn't use my fingers, I couldn't lift my arms up, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't eat, I couldn't talk, and I felt like a prisoner of my body, and even if I wanted to run away, I couldn't. But I'm 12 years down the track now, and I can tell you from my experience that it was far worse being a prisoner of my mind than being a prisoner of my body. Because today I feel free, I'm happy, I get to do all these things. And Peter talked about the different things that I've been able to do. But you know, one of the things I did last week, I went to catch up with a friend who runs a space agency or space company, and he's building rockets. And he's promised to put me into space in the next 10 years. But I wouldn't have been able to do that when I had depression. I wouldn't have even dreamt about it. So it's been a really amazing thing, and I remember the very moment that I realized that I might have emerged from the depression, because I drove out of my garage and I could see the green of the trees, and it was so rich and so beautiful, and I was just amazed, and I could feel the sun, the warmth of it on my skin, and I could hear the music, and suddenly I felt connected to the world. So depression was just, I think I was just in a different world then. But you know, it's also how I discovered my purpose of becoming a doctor, because I saw a doctor then, and through that he changed my world, and I decided I wanted to get into the business of changing worlds, and here we are.
Your world did change on the 31st of January 2010. Tell us what happened.
So after depression, I ended up going to medical school, and then I felt like I had purpose and I loved life and things were good. In fact, like, I used to wake up every morning. I lived in Gold Coast. And I used to live in an apartment where I could see the ocean every day. As you wake up, look outside the window and think about how lucky I am to have found my purpose and to be happy again. So I was loving life. And the thing is, right, you can love life and you can have all these plans and you can think that you've got everything under control. But the reality is, nature can take that away within seconds, and the world can change within seconds. Just like we found over the last couple of years with COVID, when we just feel so small next to nature, right? That's what happened to me. I used to go home to visit my mum often in Brisbane, and it was one of those weekends where I just went home and I ate her chicken curry. I've been asked for this recipe so many times.
Yeah, he writes a lot about it in the book.
Yeah,
we should not leaving today without it.
Yeah. So if I write another book, it's going to be...
Needs to be a recipe book.
There's going to be a recipe.
And your mum needs to be on the cover of that one, not you.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Holding the chicken curry.
Yeah.
So I went home and I ate a heap of chicken, and I was just a slob when I was at home, right? I didn't get out of my boxer shorts or the couch. But I often think about serendipity, because it's a pretty far out idea for us to think that, sure, it might be possible, but like that billions of years ago we were just bacteria, and then we evolved, and now we're here spinning on this planet in the middle of a universe, and we've all got to know each other, and we've all become friends, and we met through these series of events, and now we're here, like how I met Naz or many of the people in this room. So, but it was one of those days, same thing, right? I decided to go home to visit my mum that weekend, and then I decided to stay home that afternoon to have dinner. And then I decided to leave the house at a particular time. And then I decided I often didn't take the road I took, but I ended up on that road that evening. There were roadworks through the day, there was rain through the day. And I came to a dark stretch of highway where it was just too dark to see too far ahead with the lights. And I came up to this, we think it was a water puddle, but it could have been oil. We're not 100% sure. But as soon as I hit it, my car lost control and it started spinning and spinning and spinning. And I was pretty terrified at the moment because it was a highway, right? You're going pretty fast. And then on the side of the road was this embankment which was slanting up at about 45 degrees. So my car spun off the road, went up that, came back down, and the front of the car slammed into the road and it started flipping through the air, front to back. It was the most violent experience that I've ever had. Like the noise, the glass exploding and things flying around the cabin. I was so freaked out. But I spoke to someone recently who had a similar car accident, minus the spinal cord injury. But they told me an interesting thing, the way they said that they felt time slowed down. And for me, I think time slowed down as well. And I felt like I had a bit of time to think. And we talk about mindfulness and stuff, and I think this is my ultimate mindfulness moment, where I stopped and I realized that I could do nothing about this situation, that it was out of my control. And the only thing I could do is think differently about it. So I just decided to think about it like a roller coaster, and I had fun. I made a conscious decision to have fun. And so for the last part of the accident, I was just having a blast. Just yelling and laughing and carrying on. But when the car landed, that's when the horror of the situation dawned on me, because I tried to get out of the car and I realized that my fingers weren't working. And then I figured out that I couldn't feel my legs or anything below my chest. And I knew that within those seconds my life had changed forever, and I was paralyzed.
You then obviously had a lot of time in hospital, rehabilitation, months and months, years really. You'd already experienced things like depression. What got you through that time? The time of, is recovery, I don't know, what is the right word? Rehabilitation? Recovery?
Yeah.
Yeah, what?
The funny thing is, I feel like everything happens for a reason, and I'm really grateful that I had depression before the accident, because after the accident, I've never felt that way. I've never felt that depressed or that anxious. So I think in a way I was prepared for what was to come, and it probably allowed me to build up some mental fortitude to deal with what was going to happen. So I'm grateful for that. So I don't think I ever felt depressed. I think I felt grief. I felt I felt a sense of loss at the start, and I certainly had to come to terms with what had happened, but never that depressed as I was previously. And I think it was a combination of things that helped get me through. The main one being people. People are so important in our lives, and my mum was the number one person. She drove to the hospital every day. It was an hour's drive those days, and she made me the chicken curry most mornings. And she turned up and she gave me food, and she, I just loved seeing it because it was just home, and you're in hospital and you just hate it, right? The hospital is the worst place. How ironic. But yeah, I just love seeing it. So Mum got me through, and there were friends that turned up and just kept me happy. And I think you just got to do it. You got no choice, right? You got no choice. You got to do it. And I don't know how we did it, but we just kept going. We just took one day at a time. I met this, I had a girlfriend who I'll admit, before the accident I was a bit of a pest and I was terrible with relationships. But there was a girl who came back. We had a brief relationship in medical school. When I was in hospital, she came back into my life. And she was just great. She used to make little picnics, and we just had picnics at my hospital bed. So those kind of things just really made a massive difference in my life, and we just got through somehow. And
it's people, I guess, I know for me and in my life, that definitely make things easier, and you know, it is people generally who make anyone's life, really. I mean, you've got an incredible support team around you. We're at Mable, so it's sort of fitting to ask this question, but how did you go about setting up the support structure?
Yeah, for a long time it was just me and my mum. For about 4 years after the accident, we had to figure out a lot of things, and there was no NDIS then, and so it was a very complicated way to live. But over time, we've developed different ways of structuring our team, and really it's more like a family. You know, today I've got Carlos and Jake here, who I think we feel more like friends. And we give Carlos a really hard time. But my life, particularly when I came back to medical school, wasn't that straightforward, and really needed a unique team that we shared the same goals, and who were passionate and who believed in doing this. So when I came back to medical school, life became really, really not straightforward, because I used to have to wake up at 3 a.m. 3 a.m., wake up, have a shower, get ready for the day, and this takes time, right? It's not a straightforward process anymore. So all those things that you take for granted, like jumping into the shower, and then my hair takes 2 hours, and all this stuff. So this doesn't just happen. So.
There's not many people who will willingly get up at 3 a.m. is there? Yeah. So I mean. So yeah, exactly. So it took people who were really passionate, who really cared, who did it out of love, and who just believed in this. So we did that, and we've had long days since then. Because often I didn't get home till about 11 at night. And even now, I still do night shifts, I do long days at work, I do multiple things a day sometimes. So my days are still long, and we travel around. Like, we've been in Cairns for 2 days, we came here last night, we're going to Melbourne Sunday night, and then we'll be back, and then I've got something that day, and then I work evening the next day. So it takes a team of people, and like my mum says, it takes a village. But I like to think that we've achieved something together that changes the conversation of disability, that shows what can be achieved with a team of people, and that shows that there are no limits. So it's been awesome. But again, people. Yeah. And we will go to audience questions really soon. If you have a question, please, we'll go to that in a moment, or if you are joining us online and you have one. I selfishly have a few more that I would like to quickly ask you. COVID-19, it was something that we all had to worry about, but particularly for people like yourself with spinal cord injury, you know, lung capacity is already compromised. Yeah. particular concerns did you have for yourself, given you were working every day, all day in a hospital?
My lung capacity is about 30% of what's expected for someone like me. So it's very, very reduced. And when I get something like the flu, I have to help myself to cough. So it's exhausting over a period of time. So it's not just, I can't produce a significant enough cough myself. I've got to push on my belly and do that. So COVID-19 was a very, very scary thing when it happened. And in some parts of the world, like the US, in some parts of the US, they were deprioritizing people with disability from accessing ventilators or life-saving medical care. When we started to see that, I was like, gosh, this is incredibly scary. In parts of Europe, they actually had formal guidelines, which you can still find online. And it was a decision-making tree for intensive care and ventilators. And the first question was, does the person have a disability? If you had an intellectual disability, autism, if you were elderly, you could not give them a ventilator and refer them to palliative care. So when I started to see these things, I was terrified. And I remember being at work when it started to happen and having a conversation with one of the senior doctors, and he said, we're going to have to choose who lives and dies. And that's a pretty scary thing, right? And
when your job is to keep everyone alive as a doctor, isn't it? It's do no harm and try and fix everyone, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I used to walk past the COVID ward, and you knew COVID was in there, like when it first started to happen. So it was a really scary thing to see those kind of things, and particularly for me, because I worked nearly at the epicenter of COVID, because Gold Coast is where it first happened. Tom Hanks was in our hospital actually, minus Wilson.
Yeah.
So just being there and being in front of that, but then at the same time, I didn't want to give up my duty as a doctor because I fought so hard to be there, and I felt like I had a responsibility to the community despite the spinal cord injury. So, I kept going to the hospital, and we had a really weird routine at home because my mum had asthma, so we made sure that we had different cleaning routines and rituals. But we got through, and it was just I think a few months ago that I finally got COVID, and to be honest, I had the time of my life because I wore no pants for 7 days and played video games and ate food. So
Chicken curry,
yeah. So that was amazing, and I was safe, and but
and you're feeling okay now.
Yeah, I was feeling okay, but I think the more point about rather than not wearing pants is that disaster situations and pandemics and things are a massive risk to people with a disability.
Yeah.
And the literature shows that the mortality rates are higher, the risks are higher, and the way we care for people is compromised. So it's something that we really need to be vigilant about. Yeah.
We'll go to some audience questions. Linda has one of our roving mics. So if you have a question, make yourself known in whatever way suits you best. Linda will pop over. If we have some questions on the online feed, Linda will also be able to read those out for Dinesh to answer.
Thanks so much, Naz. We actually do have a couple of questions that have come through from our online audience, so we might go with those first, which will give people here an opportunity to have a think about what they'd like to ask. So we have someone that has asked Dinesh, do all patients react positively to you in the hospital setting, or are some wary of your disability?
Yeah, I love that question. Thank you. Can I also just point out that Linda has an unusually long microphone? And this is something that, this is actually something that came up before I came back to medical school. Because there were a lot of naysayers, and there were a lot of people who said I couldn't do it, right? Actually, even this morning, I was helping a medical student at a particular medical school he has a disability, and his medical school is trying to kick him out because he can't perform CPR. I work in Australia's busiest emergency department. I don't need to perform CPR. Like, it's just not something we need to do. There are machines that do it. There are other people that do it. You want your doctor thinking about why you're dying, not performing compressions. So anyway, one of the things that came up when I came back to medical school was, will the patients take you seriously? And this was one of the senior most doctors that said it. So now I'm about to go into my 7th year as a doctor next year. I've seen thousands and thousands and thousands of patients. You know, it actually even shocks me that not a single one of them has ever asked me if I can do my job. Not a single one of them has ever been doubtful. They've all been supportive. They've all been amazing. I don't know if they've ever thought anything in the back of their minds, but we never had a conversation to that effect. Some doctors have been a different conversation, but I think it makes me think we need to give our society more credit, right? We need to give our community more credit, because it's actually some of the institutions and structures that are probably more discriminatory than the people that walk this earth. So I've been super grateful to the patients who I've had the privilege of seeing. Some have tried to seduce me in the ED. And some have actually, some have sent me cards and thank you notes, and I've seen things that they've written online about our interactions. So it just reminds me why I do this job, and it reminds me why I'm so grateful.
Can I jump in and ask another question? For people who are wondering, can you talk to us about some of the perhaps unique ways that you do your job? For example, when people ask me how I read the news, you know, I've got a way of doing that no one else does in the world. What pieces of equipment do you use? What's different about how you do it?
Yeah, so I can't use my fingers, but I've learned how to use a stethoscope. I've learned how to examine a patient. I've learned how to do a bunch of things. I actually hadn't sutured a patient, right? Stitched someone for their wounds until last year, but I was at work and one of my bosses said, have you ever sutured a patient? I said, no. And he said, we should try today.
Isn't that different to when you first wanted to get back into it? Yeah.
Exactly. And he said, we just need to find the right customer. So
customer.
So yeah. So we go to the waiting room and we look around, and there's a lady in her 70s. She'd been out with her friends that day. She'd managed to get this huge gash on her forearm. So we go up to her and my boss says, this has never been done probably on earth ever before. And he can't use his fingers, but we want to try and put some stitches in you. And she said, that sounds great. And so we go into the procedure room and we're laughing and she's having a great old time. And we had a blast, and I managed to put, I think, 7 or 8 stitches, you know, and she was happy with the result. It was cosmetically good. And so there are a lot of things that I figure out I can do.
With your arms, with your forearms and
Yeah. And you know, a majority of my job I'm independent, so which is great.
And you use the tablet, don't you, to kind of have all the electronic files and medical records and keep all your sort of, you know, vitals for patients in there?
Yep.
As well?
Yeah, I used to, but I start to use computers more now. We have voice recognition in the hospital, so all these things make a massive difference. Like, technology is amazing. I have an ultrasound that's connected to my phone.
Fantastic.
There is so much tech that helps you bridge that gap, and there are some things that I selectively, you know, oh, the patient needs a rectal exam. I have a spinal cord injury. I'm so sorry.
Unable to do that.
Yeah, junior doctor, can you?
There's a robot for that, surely.
Yeah.
We had another question from someone online, Linda.
Yes, we did, Naz. So the other question that we had, Dinesh, sorry, I'm a little behind you here,
No, that's right.
was what was one of the main challenges for you in writing the book Stronger?
Really, it was just making the time because I did this in between my day job as a doctor and my moonlighting gigs at various other things. So it was really just time and making time. So I did it in between all that. So sometimes I just wrote in the office until the sun came up.
Was it also hard to think back to things like the accident and taking yourself back to some of those really traumatic moments?
You know, it's really weird. Maybe it's because the way I thought about the accident when it was happening, but I don't feel like bad about it at all. I think, I have pictures of my car wreck and I think it looks really cool. So I don't actually have any, I don't have any distress when I think back to any of it. And most of it's just a matter of fact. And most of it with things, you know, it's an interesting thing because sometimes we think, oh, this happened to me. But today I actually think a lot of these things happened for me.
Yeah.
It's made me who I am today. So no, I think it was more the time and just getting it done.
Are there any questions from the audience here?
I think we do have a question here. Naz? So, yeah.
Hi, Dr. Dinesh. My name's Heidi. It's actually related to time. My question is, how do you manage everything you do? From being a lawyer, a doctor, a disability advocate, travelling, I reached out to you on social media and you responded extraordinarily, you know, as soon as you finished your shift in the emergency ward and came home, and I was like, I cannot believe that you responded. I've spoken to other people and how do you do all that? It's extraordinary.
Thank you.
Just wondering how you manage everything that you do and still manage to reach out to people.
I think time is, like, I've just learned the preciousness of time and not leaving things to tomorrow. So I try to, like, make the most of every minute and make the most of everything that I got. So, and I think I always think if someone takes the time to write to you, that's a pretty special and precious thing that you've given your time to reach out to me. So how could I not reply? So
many people reach out to you.
But I think people matter so much, and if you can make a, you know, if you can make a connection, if you can make an impact. But I try to just try to seize every moment, and I try to seize every opportunity, and I try to fit things in. Like I'll sometimes just take meetings while I'm on the road, or because one of the benefits is I don't have to get dressed, I get dressed. So while Carlos is putting my pants on, I can reply to an email. So I try to take advantage of...
It's working smarter, not harder, hey?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I try to use time like that as well. But, you know, how can I not? Like people spend their entire lives wanting to write a book. People spend their entire lives wanting to talk to amazing people. So I've got all these things given to me. How can I not?
You do sleep.
Occasionally, yeah.
That's a great question. Do we have any more?
We do have some questions.
Yeah.
Excuse me while I get to here.
That is a long microphone. You're right. Hi, Dinesh. So great to finally meet in person. We hear a lot about diversity and inclusion. You know, it's all, you know, it's sort of buzzwords.
Yeah.
How do you think diversity and inclusion add to the well-being of society at large, and how important is it, and how do we improve it?
I would love to see the day where we don't have to talk about it and it's not a thing. And so it's like, oh, look, it's just another doctor in a wheelchair or whatever. Like, I would love to be made irrelevant, really. But I think it's actually, so it's one of the other reasons why I think I love to connect with people is just that it's a one-on-one thing. You just start with one person at a time. You include one person at a time, and you help one person at a time. And that one person will hopefully help another person, and it's a snowball effect, right? We don't need to look at, because I find like we have all these big grand plans and strategies on diversity and inclusion, but it gets lost somewhere when it filters down to the operational levels at organizations or whatever. So actually, like, us taking a chance on one person at a time makes a massive difference, and just saying yes. I actually have friends and colleagues from the Disability Royal Commission and the Human Rights Commission here today as well. And they do a lot of work in taking these conversations forward. And we live in an amazing country. Like, we have all these things where people are working hard to make it better. But I think at the end of the day, we still have to do that for each other, and we still have to make a difference for each other. I was sitting I actually got a business class upgrade yesterday, but it was just me. So the rest of my mum, Carlos and Jake, were sitting at the back. But they were coming up intermittently to give me a hand. And the guy sitting next to me, he just said, "Why don't I go back and sit so your mum can sit here and help you, or Carlos?" You know, those simple things matter. But also, when I was at work in my emergency department, when I was struggling to get the job, those doctors offered to give up their salary for me. They've fought for me. Now they just tease me like anyone else, and I feel like a part of the family. But you know, those things really mattered. And then now I acknowledge them, and I do the same for others. So yeah. I think we just have to fight for one person at a time. We have to be there for one person at a time.
I think we are fast approaching the end. Is there time for one more audience question, or do we have another audience question?
Dinesh, hi. Going back to your lawyer days and the fact that we're talking about diversity and inclusion, you mentioned that laws sometimes help. As the CEO of a disability organisation, sometimes laws are the things that stop us from getting the access and inclusion that we want. Australia doesn't have a Bill of Rights. What do you think about how that might change access and inclusion for people with disability?
Yeah, that's a great question, thank you. I think the utility of that became really apparent to me when I spent time in the US as a medical student. So I had the privilege, I was the first visiting quadriplegic medical student at the Harvard University in its history. And I applied to go there, and then I sent them an email saying, I have spinal cord injury and I can't use my fingers, and these are the challenges. I didn't get a reply back, but they just said, yeah, come. And then I went, and I got around the hospital, and I was just curious because like no one seemed to really care. Whereas here, like, you know, it was a bit more of a fuss. So I went and asked some of the senior people, and their response was like, if you have the merit to be here, we don't really care, but also we're not allowed to discriminate on things like that. And I think it's the Americans with Disabilities Act that really gives them a strong foundation not to do that. And being a more litigious society than us, I think they're just scared of that sort of thing. So we could probably use more legal protections like that. And I think when it actually comes to fighting things on the law, it's hugely costly in this country. And for a person with a disability who's trying to get their job or keep their job or get educated, who actually don't have an economic backing as a result, how are they going to afford a lawyer to fight that? So there are heaps of barriers that cause things like that, and I think we need to make that a bit better. So I think it would be really useful, and access to justice as well. And we need to take these things to court, and we need to fight it, and we need to win. Yeah.
Great. Well, I think, Dinesh, you had everyone hanging on every word, and I think your wit certainly shone through as well. And we called this a Q&A with Naz, but I think it was just a lovely conversation, and I think everyone really enjoyed it. I think the one thing that I read in the book that I think related to your comment about finding purpose, and I actually found myself relaying this quote last night that you attribute to your mum. And I relayed it last night over dinner to somebody I'd never met before, and I was also relaying it to my wife, and I just wanted to read it out because for me I thought it was just this incredible enlightenment that came through this statement, which was saying, by helping one person you may not change the world, but you will change the world for them. And if there's one thing I think we can all think about is that quote. So I thought that was beautiful, and I'm going to start stealing that and sharing it, because I think maybe it'll cause inspiration to others. But I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us today, both here at Mable and online, and I'd encourage you all to buy the book. I think it's an amazing story that needs to be read and shared. So thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you
having
to
me.
Dinesh.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.